So you think you know psychoanalysis because you know Freud? Well, the story definitely did not end with him. In fact, after he laid the groundwork, the whole field just exploded. Today, we're going to look at what happened when three of his most brilliant and rebellious successors took his ideas and just ran with them, creating completely new ways of seeing the human mind.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? Freud set the stage. He gave us the couch, the 50-minute hour, the focus on childhood. But what happens when you start to poke holes in that? What happens when you decide to break the rules? Well, you get some incredible innovation and three totally new maps for what's going on inside our heads.
And here they are, our three rebels. We've got Jacques Lacan, the French intellectual maverick, who basically rewrote Freud using linguistics. Then there's Wilfred Bion, the British mystic, who asked a deeper question. Not what do we think, but how do we even learn to think at all? And finally, Robert Langs, the American mechanic who tried to turn the whole thing into a hard science of survival. Three geniuses, three completely different visions. All right, first up, Jacques Lacan, a man who was as controversial as he was brilliant. For Lacan, psychoanalysis had been missing the biggest clue of all: language. He believed that everything about who we are, what we desire, what we fear, it all comes back to the words we use and the invisible structures they build around us. Lacan called this structure the symbolic. You're not just born into a family, you're born into a pre-existing universe of language, rules, and laws. It's already there, waiting for you. And this isn't just background noise. For Lacan, this structure grabs you, it shapes you, and it pretty much defines your reality before you can even speak. We think we use language, but Lacan would say, oh no, language uses us. And this is his mic drop moment. The unconscious is structured like a language. So what on earth does that mean? It means that all that weird, messy stuff inside us, our dreams, our Freudian slips, our deepest desires, it's not just chaos. It actually follows a set of rules. Not the rules of logic, but the rules of language, things like metaphor and wordplay. Your unconscious is like a poet, always sending you coded messages. And you can see how this starts with what he called the mirror stage. Picture a baby. On the inside, it just feels like this jumble of sensations and disconnected limbs, total chaos. But then it sees itself in a mirror and sees a whole, complete person looking back. And the baby thinks, that's me. And right there, in that moment of identification with an outside image, our ego is born. It's our first, and maybe our biggest, misunderstanding of who we really are. So if the unconscious speaks in these sudden, poetic bursts, your therapy has to match that rhythm, right? Lacan thought so. He completely threw out the standard 50-minute hour. Instead, he created the variable length session. It could be an hour or it could be 5 minutes. The second a patient said something truly revealing, a key slip of the tongue, he'd just end the session. Cut. It was like a jolt, an exclamation point that forced the person to really sit with the truth that had just broken through. Okay, let's shift gears completely. From the linguistic acrobatics of Lacan in Paris, we go to London to Wilfred Bion, our mystic. Bion was asking a much more fundamental question. He was less interested in the content of our thoughts and obsessed with how we develop the capacity to have a thought in the first place. And this is his incredible model for it. He said we're constantly being hit with raw, unprocessed feelings and sensations. He called these beta elements. They're just pure, terrifying chaos. To not go insane, our mind has to develop what he called an alpha function. Think of it like a digestive system for experience. It takes in all that raw chaos and turns it into alpha elements, the stuff you can actually use to think, to dream, and to remember. The key here is you aren't just born with a mind. You have to build one to deal with reality. So, how do we build it? Well, we learn from somebody else. This is Bion's absolutely beautiful concept of maternal reverie. A baby is overwhelmed with terror, right? Pure beta elements, it can't handle it, so it projects that terror into its mother. The mother, using her own mind, her own alpha function, takes in that raw fear, kind of digests it for the baby, and then gives it back in a more manageable form, through a calm voice or a gentle touch. She's basically lending the baby her mind. And over time, the baby internalizes this process and learns how to do it for itself. Bion's approach to therapy was just as radical. He famously said an analyst has to work without memory and desire. What does that mean? It means you walk into the room and you forget everything you know. Forget what the patient said last week, forget all your clever theories, forget your desire to fix them. By emptying your own mind, you become this perfectly receptive container, able to tune into the raw, unspoken emotional truth of the room. Right here, right now. It's all about pure, intuitive presence. And now, for a complete 180, we meet our final thinker, Robert Langs, the mechanic. Langs was a no-nonsense American who looked at all this theory and basically said, you're all missing the point. For him, the mind isn't a poem or a mystery, it's a biological tool for survival, period. He wanted to make psychoanalysis a rigorous, verifiable science. So what drives this survival machine? According to Langs, it's not sex, it's not aggression, it's death anxiety. He argued that the #1 job of the unconscious mind is to manage the overwhelming terror of knowing we're alive, we're vulnerable, and one day we will die. Everything else we do, our defenses, our symptoms, the stories we tell ourselves, it's all just a strategy to cope with that one massive, terrifying fact. And he broke it down with scientific precision. First, there's predatory anxiety. That's the fear of actual threats out there in the world. Then you have predation anxiety. That's the guilt you feel when you harm someone else. And then there's the big one, existential anxiety, that deep, gut-level dread that comes from simply knowing you exist and that you won't exist forever. These are the powerful forces that shape us from the inside out. Because of this, his method was like a CSI investigation of the mind. He believed that every story a patient tells is an encoded message about a recent real-world event, what he called the trigger. So the therapist's job is to be a detective. Step 1, find the trigger. Step 2, decode the patient's story to see how it's a metaphor for that trigger. Step 3, validate your theory by seeing if their next unconscious communication confirms your interpretation. It's a strict scientific process. This is why, for Langs, the rules of therapy, what he called the frame, were absolutely sacred. The exact time, the exact fee, total confidentiality. Any slip-up by the therapist, like starting 1 minute late, wasn't a minor mistake. Oh no, it was a massive trigger. It signaled to the patient's deep unconscious that the environment was not safe, activating all those survival anxieties. In fact, for Langs, the therapist's mistakes were often the most important events in the entire therapy. Phew. Okay, so after that deep dive, let's pull the camera back. Let's put these 3 radical visions side by side. We have the maverick, the mystic, and the mechanic. How do their ideas actually stack up when you put them right next to each other? This table really makes it crystal clear. Ask them, what is the unconscious? Lacan, the maverick, says it's structured like a language, driven by desire. Bion, the mystic, says it's a capacity for thinking that you have to build to deal with raw experience. And Langs, the mechanic, says it's a biological survival tool, driven by death anxiety. So you've got language, capacity, or adaptation. 3 fundamentally different operating systems for the human mind. So if you had to boil this all down to one essential takeaway, what would it be? It really comes down to this. Lacan sees your unconscious as a text that has to be read. Bion sees it as a muscle that has to be developed. And Langs sees it as a warning system that has to be listened to. Is your deepest self a structure, a capacity, or a tool? And that's the question I want to leave you with. As you look at our world today, with all its social media, its information overload, its constant change, which of these visions feels the most true to you? Are we beings defined by the structures of language? Are we struggling to build the mental capacity just to process it all? Or, at the end of the day, are we just adaptive animals doing our best to survive? There's probably no single right answer, but thinking about the question, well, that's what really matters.